Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really rich stack of sources drawn straight from various sections of a newspaper, everything from editorial pieces right through to the science section. Our mission, as always, is to distill the most important nuggets of knowledge, maybe some surprising insights too, helping you quickly get well informed on quite a diverse range of topics.
Exactly. We're looking to connect the dots,
hmm
across these different fields, give you a comprehensive yet hopefully pretty concise understanding of what truly matters in these sources. So yeah, let's get right into it.
Okay, first up, we're starting in the editorial section. This piece directly challenges us with the author's observation, ideas on trial, critical thinking in retreat. And it opens with a really powerful quote from Rosa Luxemburg. Freedom is always and exclusively the freedom of the one who thinks differently. So, what exactly is at stake here, and why does this feel so incredibly timely right now?
Well, the author argues that in our current era of, let's say, heightened global scrutiny and geopolitical tensions, nations aren't just safeguarding territory, they're also guarding their kind of moral foundations. And the striking insight here, I think, is that intellectual freedom seems to be steadily eroding across institutions worldwide, especially in universities. We're seeing some alarming trends, professors facing reprimands for maybe minor comments, students getting discipline for asking critical questions. The piece specifically points to the United States during Donald Trump's presidency and also the really heated pro-Palestinian demonstrations on campuses as, well, stark examples of this unsettling pattern.
Right. And the article brings in thinkers like Hannah Arendt too, warning about the dangers of what she called the banality in oppressive regimes,
Yeah.
this slow numbing of thought. It really drives home that this isn't just about, overt censorship, is it? It feels like it's about inducing a more, well, insidious kind of silence where fear just subtly replaces genuine inquiry.
That's a very chilling point, yeah. When curricula gets rewritten to fit a specific ideology, or when scholarly work is attacked and free speech gets deliberately framed as, say, sedition, it profoundly impairs a society's capacity for critical self-reflection and ultimately growth. The author quotes Noam Chomsky, whose work on propaganda highlighted, the destruction of independent culture as a really grave abuse of authority. He warned of manufactured consent, a democracy that looks like one on the surface but isn't really in substance. So the question becomes, if critical voices are branded as anti-national or scholars are seen as threats, what are the long-term costs? It seems like society loses its immune system for self-correction.
Hmm. It's painted as this false choice, isn't it? The idea that freedom of speech is some kind of luxury that needs to be curtailed for national unity. But the article does offer some hope, reminding us that suppression is almost always contested. You think of people like Václav Havel, who believed that just living in truth was itself a powerful political act.
That's a crucial distinction. True democratic vitality isn't built on conformity. It's actually forged in the capacity to listen to and, importantly, engage with dissenting voices. The article provocatively suggests that patriotism isn't about unyielding conformity, but rather a profound commitment to betterment through constructive critique. So this capacity for receptivity, for truly hearing different viewpoints, it becomes a vital litmus test for the health and maybe the resilience of a democracy.
Okay, so moving from societal discourse, let's pivot to global economics. Our next editorial zeroes in on a particularly promising area of collaboration between the UK and India. It's about these global capability centers, or GCCs, as part of their historic free trade agreement. What exactly are these GCCs, and why are they so central to this big agreement?
Right? GCCs are essentially strategic hubs. It's where multinational corporations centralize crucial functions. We're talking about everything from, cutting-edge R&D, advanced analytics, cybersecurity, all the way to emerging tech solutions. And India is already a global powerhouse in this space. It's home to over 1,500 GCCs, employing more than 1.9 million people. That's quite something. What's truly insightful here is that British companies are increasingly seeing India not just as a cost-effective back office, which was maybe the old view, but as an indispensable strategic innovation partner. And the FTA, the Free Trade Agreement, is seen as the catalyst for even deeper engagement, specifically by easing regulatory barriers, making professional movement easier, and harmonizing standards for digital and data governance.
So it really does sound like a win-win then. It reinforces the UK's global services footprint, especially post-Brexit, while perfectly aligning with India's ambitious digital economy goals. The UK-India Business Council, the UKBC, they make it pretty clear, don't they? The future of trade isn't just about goods anymore. It's profoundly about services, skills, and technology.
Precisely. And the FTA directly targets some of the practical challenges that currently hold back the scaling of GCCs. Things like double taxation, complex data localization mandates. These are real hurdles. There's a white paper from Deloitte India mentioned, which actually corroborates India's significant advancements here. It shows India-based GCCs evolving into key hubs for managing intricate global tax operations. That sends a very strong signal, to international investors about India's maturity and reliability in this sector.
Interesting. And it seems there's also an ongoing internal debate within India itself about the best policy approach for these GCCs. Like, is a national policy framework needed, or are state-level policies actually working better?
Yes, exactly. The article highlights a recent UK-BC consultation that really delved into these questions, along with the critical need for fostering talent diversity
Right.
and also managing the diversity within the GCCs themselves. They're not all the same. It also touched on practical experiences, some legal hurdles, the broader market outlook, but ultimately the driving goal seems to be leveraging the FTA to help Indian GCCs climb higher up the global value chain. And there's a significant emphasis on professional mobility between the two countries. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it's really about shaping a more resilient, dynamic, and truly knowledge-based economic corridor between the UK and India, moving beyond just traditional trade in goods.
Right, makes sense. Now let's shift gears completely. We're heading into an opinion piece that deeply analyzes geopolitics and India's global ambitions. The author, who is described as a seasoned geopolitics expert and former diplomat, raises a pretty significant concern: a potential U.S.-Israel-Iran war and the threat that poses to India's quest for great power status. This angle adds a crucial layer of complexity, I think.
Yeah, this piece presents a compelling argument. It suggests that such a conflict, especially if it led to regime change or, even worse, the fragmentation of Iran, balkanization would decisively cement U.S.-led unipolarity in West Asia. And that outcome directly clashes with India's long-held vision of a multipolar world. India's strategic influence in the region, which has been meticulously built on engaging diverse states like Syria and Iran, well, that would inevitably decline. Furthermore, all of India's energy imports from West Asia would then be sourced solely from U.S.-aligned governments. That creates a significant dependency, obviously.
So, reinforcing the existing global hegemon, the U.S., effectively weakens rising powers like India. That underlying tension isn't exactly new, is it? It's bubbled up before. The article mentions instances like former U.S. President Trump threatening sanctions on countries buying Russian oil, and apparently a UK paper even called India an enemy for commissioning a Russian warship at one point.
It really prompts us to consider, why does India, despite its strategic partnership with the U.S. against the China threat, so adamantly prioritize multipolarity? The article states it pretty unequivocally. India's primary motivation for partnering with the U.S. does not outweigh its foundational goal of multipolarity. This deeply held goal informs Delhi's policy choices. It actively inhibits any actions that would reinforce U.S.-led unipolarity. We saw that clearly with India's defiance of Western demands regarding isolating Russia.
And the author suggests a path to peace, urging India to impress upon Washington the tangible benefits of actually accepting global multipolarity. How might India effectively, make that case?
Well, the author makes a striking point here. When you consider the alternatives, like a kinetic great power war, or maybe Chinese hegemony multipolarity, is actually far from the worst scenario, even from the West's perspective. The piece suggests that the present moment, with U.S. public opinion seemingly shifting towards non-interventionism, might offer a unique window of opportunity. India, being the most powerful independent state that the U.S. still regards as a partner, could potentially carry significant weight in advocating for a truly multipolar global order. It's a subtle, but I think profound, argument about strategic leverage in a shifting world.
Okay, from policy and geopolitics, let's shift again. This time to something equally impactful, but maybe less commonly discussed: human-induced earthquakes. This article from the science section really makes you rethink what you thought you knew about seismic activity. We tend to think of quakes as purely natural, right? But this highlights how human activities are increasingly part of the picture.
Indeed. The article reveals that over 700 human-induced earthquakes have been recorded worldwide in just the last 150 years. And, disturbingly, they seem to be becoming more common. Activities like mining, excessive groundwater extraction, impounding huge amounts of water behind dams, injecting fluids into the ground for things like fracking, even constructing immense tall buildings and engineering coastal structures. All of these have been shown to potentially induce seismic activity. The underlying mechanism is fascinating, really. It's because loading and unloading the Earth's crust repeatedly can cause strain to slowly accumulate underground until it eventually reaches a tipping point.
Wow. The article gives specific examples from India, too, like a 2021 study linking shallow earthquakes in the National Capital Region, Delhi NCR, to excessive groundwater extraction. How exactly does that happen? What's the sort of physics behind it?
It's a surprising connection, isn't it? When you pump out massive amounts of groundwater, the sheer mass of that water, which was maintaining pressure underground, is removed. This reduction in pressure can create subtle shifts and, well, jolts on the surface. While Delhi NCR quakes are typically minor, the maximum recorded magnitude can apparently go up to 4.5. Now, for a densely populated city like Delhi, which is already in seismic risk zone 4, even minor tremors, if amplified by local ground conditions, could pose significant risks. And the article points out this risk extends across the entire Gangetic Plains, where the water table is, frankly, dropping dangerously low. It really brings home the critical need to manage groundwater extraction and recharge scientifically, keeping seismic activity in mind.
And the impact of large dams changing water loads on the surface? That's significant too, right? I remember the 1967 Koynagar earthquake, which tragically killed 180 people, was directly blamed on water overloading in the nearby dam.
Absolutely, and we've seen similar patterns elsewhere. Increased seismic activity around the Multipolar Dam in Kerala has also been recorded, for instance. Experts suggest that India should seriously consider implementing regulations, maybe similar to those in the U.S., on how quickly dams are filled and emptied. And crucially, they advocate for thorough seismic activity evaluations before constructing dams, especially in quake-prone areas like the Himalayas. With India's growing energy demand driving more oil exploration, hydropower projects, including fracking, this risk is only likely to increase. What's also notable is how climate change indirectly feeds into this. Things like melting glaciers triggering quakes, or altered rainfall patterns changing stress on tectonic plates, like in the Sahyadri Range. It highlights a really complex interplay between human activity and natural processes.
But the experts also offer a crucial caveat, warning against solely blaming human activities for all of this, don't they? It's not happening everywhere, only in areas already sitting on fault lines or facing plate deformation. So these activities then just seem to postpone or maybe accelerate natural tectonic processes that would happen eventually anyway.
That's a vital point to remember, yes. Human actions aren't creating brand new fault lines out of thin air. They're more like nudging existing geological systems towards a release of energy that was perhaps inevitable down the line. It's a subtle but powerful reminder of our impact on the planet's dynamic systems.
Okay, let's move into the text section now. Here we tackle a question that seems really fundamental to democracy but has, well, surprisingly complex legal nuances. What is the actual legal status of the right to vote in India? Apparently this is being debated right now in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this deep dive helps us understand the crucial distinctions between different types of rights in the Indian legal system. It's quite layered. First, you have natural rights. These are seen as inherent, inalienable, like the right to life and liberty. Then, fundamental rights, these are specifically guaranteed in Part 3 of the Constitution, making them directly enforceable in the Supreme Court. Think freedom of speech. Next are constitutional rights. These are also in the Constitution but outside Part 3. The right to property used to be one, now operationalized by laws. And finally, you have statutory or legal rights. These are provided and can be amended by ordinary laws passed by Parliament or state legislatures, like, say, the right to work under specific schemes.
Okay, so with those distinctions clear, where does the right to vote actually fit into this intricate legal framework? Article 326 of the Constitution clearly grants every citizen the right to vote without discrimination if they're 18 and not disqualified. But then, Section 62 of the Representation of the People Act, 1951, specifies that this right isn't exercisable by someone who is disqualified or, notably, in prison.
Right. And the legal status of the right to vote has indeed been a subject of significant and sometimes shifting debate in the Indian courts over the years. In early cases, like N.P. Ponnaswamy back in 1952 and Jyoti Basu in 1982, the Supreme Court held it was squarely a statutory right, created by law. Then a notable shift, or at least observation, occurred in the PUCL case in 2003. Justice P.V. Reddy observed it as a constitutional right, emanating from the Constitution itself. However, in Kuldip Nair in 2006, the court sort of reverted, categorizing it back as statutory. And most recently, the majority opinion in the Anup Ranwal case in 2023 reiterated its standing as a statutory right. So currently, as of the latest major ruling, it officially stands as a statutory right.
But there was a really notable and impactful dissent in that Annie Bharanwal case, wasn't there, from Justice Ajay Rastogi? That seems to be a key point of ongoing discussion.
Absolutely. Justice Rastogi's dissent is pivotal here. He powerfully argued that the right to vote is a fundamental expression of a citizen's choice. He believes it falls under the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression, which is guaranteed by Article 19A. He also emphasized its intrinsic link to free and fair elections, which, as we know, are recognized as part of the basic structure of the Constitution. So while it currently remains a statutory right according to the majority, Justice Rastogi's dissenting view and the ongoing debate certainly suggest that the Supreme Court may still consider elevating its status, perhaps to a constitutional right, in the future, given its profound implications for democracy.
Okay, next up, we're tackling a very current, very contentious issue that touches almost every industry. The intersection of artificial intelligence and copyright. The big question. Do AI models, in how they're trained and what they produce, actually violate copyright law?
This is a truly global legal frontier, yeah. Generative AI models have this astonishing ability to produce content that can closely resemble or sometimes even directly duplicate original works from their vast training data sets. The core legal challenge really boils down to this.
Yeah.
Does training an AI on original works and then its subsequent creative output undermine the original works market by essentially replacing them? Or, conversely, is the AI-generated content sufficiently transformative? Does it add enough new value and expression to qualify for protection itself, maybe even under fair use? The legality of AI training on copyrighted data, it remains globally unsettled. It's a complex patchwork of evolving interpretations right now.
Right. The article specifically points out legal issues around reproduction rights, just copying the data for training, and whether that constitutes infringement or if it qualifies as fair use, like in the US, or maybe a text and data mining exception as seen in the EU and UK.
Yeah.
It really highlights a striking lack of explicit, harmonized global regulation, doesn't it?
That's precisely it. Intellectual property laws in most countries were developed long before AI was even a glimmer in anyone's eye. This leads to significant legal uncertainty. And this applies not just to the often opaque training process, but also to the really thorny question of who owns the IP rights in the output generated by the AI, especially for copyright, where traditionally human creativity has been an absolute requirement for authorship. It fundamentally challenges existing legal frameworks.
So what have some of the recent U.S. judgments actually said about this? The article mentions 3 key rulings: Thomson Reuters versus Ross Intelligence, Bartz versus Anthropic, and Cadre versus Meta. What signals are these early judgments sending out?
Well, the article details 2 of these landmark rulings, offering some crucial insights. In the Bartz versus Anthropic case, the court ruled that using copyrighted data for training AI was, in fact, transformative. They drew an analogy to a writer learning from a vast library of prior works. However, it's really important to note that Anthropic still faces trial for allegedly using pirated copies to develop its material. So it highlights that the means of acquiring the training data still very much matters.
Okay, so transformative use might be okay, but not if the data was stolen.
Seems to be the implication there, yes. Then, in the Cadre versus Meta case, the court ruled in Meta's favor. It concluded the plaintiffs hadn't sufficiently established that the AI output diluted the market for their original works. Meta's actions in this instance were covered under the broad umbrella of fair use. What's particularly significant perhaps across both these rulings is that judges adopted a remarkably broad view of fair use for AI training, which effectively provides crucial legal protection for tech firms, at least for now. But they also subtly signal that piracy remains a clear liability, and perhaps that innovative compensation systems for creators whose work is used in training are, well, long overdue.
And what are the specific implications of these developing legal landscapes for India?
The ongoing ANI versus OpenAI lawsuit in India is definitely one to watch closely. Under India's Copyright Act of 1957, copyright owners have exclusive economic rights. Generally, that requires permissions for commercial use, unless the principle of fair dealing applies, which is somewhat similar to, but distinct from, U.S. fair use. Now, while some critics argue India's IP laws lack specific AI provisions, the official government position seems to be that the current framework is actually sufficient to handle these emerging challenges. India, being a member of key international IP treaties, recognizes works created by legal persons, like companies, and has established enforcement mechanisms. So the suggestion is it believes it can adapt its existing laws rather than needing entirely new ones specifically for AI. Time will tell.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, for our final deep dive today, let's explore the truly surprising and actually fundamental physics behind something almost everyone interacts with daily: your television screen. How do those tiny electrons actually become the light we see? How did we go from that cubic box to the sleek flat screens we have today?
It all begins, fundamentally, thanks to remarkable materials called phosphors. When an electron, which is moving at incredibly high speed, strikes a phosphor material, that material instantly emits light. This happens because the electrons within the phosphor atoms get momentarily excited, bumped up to higher energy levels. As they then relax back down to their original lower energy states, they release that excess energy in the form of light particles, or photons. It's the exact same principle, actually, behind why you see phosphor coatings inside older fluorescent tube lights. It's this magical conversion of invisible electron energy into visible light.
Okay, but to create a moving picture, you don't just need light. You need specific regions to light up and then change incredibly quickly, frame by frame. How is that precise control achieved in those older, bulky TV sets?
That's where the cathode ray tube, or CRT, came in. A truly groundbreaking invention from the early 1900s. It was essentially a large vacuum tube designed to generate a tightly focused stream, or beam, of electrons. Then, using precisely controlled magnetic fields, these electrons could be deflected bent to hit different exact points on the phosphor-coated screen at the front. The magnetic field, through something called the Lorentz force, doesn't change the speed of these charged particles, but it can make them curve or move in a circle.
Yeah.
You can think of it as an incredibly precise traffic manager for electrons. It directs them to illuminate specific tiny dots on the screen, and it does this so fast, scanning across lines, that our eyes perceive a continuous, moving image. And these early television circuits, by the way, were entirely analog, no digital processing.
Right, the giant heavy box.
So how did the invention of the transistor change all this? How did that allow us to move from CRTs to the incredibly thin flat screens we have now? What does this mean for modern displays?
Well, the invention of the transistor in 1947 and the subsequent revolution in semiconductor electronics completely transformed display technology. It was a game changer. Instead of relying solely on phosphors lit by a scan beam in a big vacuum tube, modern TVs often use materials like gallium arsenide phosphide, GaAs. These materials can emit light directly when electrons enter them. And complex electronic motherboards, tiny integrated circuits, can direct those electrons with far greater precision to individual pixels, picture elements on the screen. But the physics gets even more futuristic. The article touches on how future TVs might evolve by taking advantage of electrons forced to move in extremely thin, essentially two-dimensional layers. This can lead to bizarre quantum phenomena like fractional quantum Hall states. And from this, a mind-bending concept called anyons emerges. These are like entirely new types of particles, quasi-particles really, with charges that are fractions of an electron's charge. And they have this weird property that they can only move along the very edges of materials.
Anyons. That sounds like something straight out of science fiction. It's incredible to think that this kind of advanced physics could be related to something as common as our TV screens. The article mentions Nobel Prizes and Wolf Prizes related to this.
Indeed. Robert Laughlin, Horst Ludwig Sturmer, and Daniel Suey won the Nobel Prize in Physics back in 1998 for the initial discovery of the fractional quantum Hall effect, which really paved the way for understanding these anyons. And Janendra Jain was awarded the prestigious Wolf Prize in Physics more recently, in 2025, according to this article, for developing the fundamental theoretical understanding of this complex physics. Scientists are even actively trying to build entirely new types of quantum computers using these anyons as their fundamental information units, their qubits. It just shows how deep fundamental discoveries in quantum condensed matter physics today can spark technological revolutions we can barely even imagine in the coming decades, extending far, far beyond just making our television screens a bit better.
It really is a powerful reminder, isn't it, that the basic physics behind even our everyday devices is incredibly intricate and still holds so much potential for the future. Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.